years.
Well, it must be a real possibility. It was in the newspaper already.
Yeah. I guess I'm a little late on sharing the news, but not everybody gets the paper, right? So.
Thank you. Jamie Lee.
Yeah, thanks for emphasizing that the school taxes are very different than the municipal taxes.
Yeah.
We could all echo that. I was also not able to attend the pension meeting because of a work conflict, but can summarize essentially the fund right now. Ended April, investment gains of $132,000, value of $28.6 million for a year-to-date gain of approximately 5.1%, which is up from 4.6% at the end of March. So.
Good. Thank you very much. Carl.
The Planning Commission met last Tuesday. Two subjects. The first was the injector wells, which we will discuss as part of the workshop items. A couple of highlights on that. The minimum acreage size for a plot of land where you would have an injector well is 5 acres. Will be proposed as 5 acres. Would be in the business district as defined. My mouth's not working here. The minimum distance from the property line from the well hole boring is 250 feet minimum. The protected structure distance from the well hole boring is 750 feet proposed. The elements of what could be put into the well would be determined by state regulations. There would be a waiver allowed, and as I understand it, that's for perhaps individuals or residents who would be perhaps within that. If they would ask for a waiver, it would be considered. The second item was the short-term rental. Just a couple key points. That was tabled, and I might say that the injector well was forwarded to council, and that's why we're discussing it. The short-term rental, the couple definitions. Short terms means less than 30 days. And also a party obtaining a permit for it, the permit is good for 1 year. And all other existing municipal ordinances would have to be met. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Medic 1 meets tomorrow night. Okay. Discussion regarding the finance software upgrade. Is that JC?
Yes, and I can maybe kick things off just to get us started. In your packet or in the briefings, this is also under item 13C, so it's kind of a duplicate listing there on the council agenda. So there won't be an item 13C because there's not an item to vote on this evening, but we did want to have discussion on the topic. I'll turn it over to JC in a moment, but essentially I had some discussion with JC regarding the finance software that she's currently using. We've been discussing it internally for a number of months now, and I had asked her to go out and see if she could find a software app or program that we could maybe upgrade to that would help for some of our reporting needs, not only internally, but also for auditing purposes and things like that. The current software that we have gives us a little bit of difficulty with some of the reporting functions. And again, I don't want to take everything away from JC. I know she's worked pretty hard to give us an update here. So I'll turn it over to her, but this is something that I think that we wanted council to hear about and consider as far as an upgrade in the finance accounting software.
Michael, and thanks, council, for hearing about the accounting software and what's going on. So currently we're using Great Plains, and it's a very antiquated system. It doesn't have a lot of reporting capabilities, which means that we do data entry into the system, and then we utilize.
Okay,
I think it is.
Your mic on?
Mike, yeah, a little closer.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll just move this forward. So it's quite an antiquated system. So the reporting capabilities are limited. So a lot of times, well, all the time, we have to enter data into our accounting software. And then there's a few reports that we can print out to get overviews. And then we supplement using Excel and our Excel created reports and do a double entry of that data into the Excel to be able to have the reports that we submit. So it takes a lot of time, and any time that you're putting data in twice, you run the risk of an increase of errors with data entry. So going out and thinking about different kind of accounting systems that we could utilize, there's very comprehensive systems that involve not just the accounting side, but also planning, receiving certain invoicing for different departments, tracking certain things, and we utilize a lot of different softwares in other departments, so we really didn't need a complex system. So there's one accounting system that specializes in municipal accounting and the multiple funds, and it's utilized by a lot of other local municipalities, which include Upper St. Clair, North Huntington, Fox Chapel, Greensburg, Mount Lebanon, Monroeville. I utilized this system when I was in Greensburg. So when I was talking to Michael about, the systems that he's upgraded to at his other, municipalities, and about what I had experience with, and I kind of was still leaning towards going for AccuFund instead of trying to find a lot of different softwares that I'm not very familiar with. AccuFund, the costs associated with the upgrade is about $17,000. The Great Plains software 20 years ago was about $14,000 for the upgrade. So the cost isn't that much more than the 20-year software that we got a while ago. The annual costs for this software actually are estimated to run about $100 less than what we're currently paying and what we've been averaging for. And I have those breakdowns in the briefing if you wanted to look at them. Do you have any questions or thoughts
You
that you'd
mentioned
want to
the cost is $100 less than what we're currently paying, which is what?
Well, currently, that cost is a factor of three different things. So our key holder fee that we pay yearly right now is about $2,000. In addition, every time there's an upgrade, there's upgrade fees that vary depending on the upgrades. And then on top of that, there is software support fees that also come into it. So when I was looking at the overall cost, I did it over the 20 years, what we pay for yearly plus the upgrades, and it broke down to approximately $2,938 a year. With the alternative software that I'm looking into, the annual fee includes any upgrades. So that fee is $2,396. And then the professional services, if we would want to reach out to get customizable reports that we'd want to add in to utilize, or any support for anything with the software, I just estimated about $500. I spoke to a local municipality and asked what their yearly costs were for their professional services, and I was told that they're spending under $500 a year in that. So taking those two into consideration, that's kind of where I got that this is looking like it's going to be about $100 less annually than what we're currently paying.
Okay, thank you.
I think if
questions?
it's- I just think if it's going to facilitate the job that she does and make the reporting process easier and lessen the errors, I think it's a good change.
Good.
I agree. Just the amount of labor and entering things twice and the amount of time that you guys spend, the time could be used so much better somewhere else. So.
And I know the auditors would really appreciate a software that can export into Excel. When they get our reports at the end of the year, they spend a lot of time transferring that data manually. And they're always asking, well, can you put this in Excel? Well, unfortunately, our system doesn't allow that, not unless we're spending hours trying to format and break apart things, and it's really just not friendly when it comes to interfacing with Excel at all.
Does it play well with Sheets, Google Sheets or Airtable or anything if you needed it to in the future?
That's a good question. I don't know firsthand. I've never tried to utilize Google Sheets, but Google Sheets kind of runs the same way that Excel does. So if there's blocking in the system, when you export it, you're left with all of the blocking and the separation, the merging of things, and
two-step it.
being that it's not very friendly on that export side, I don't know much software that it would be able to go into and be able to break apart easily.
So if you can do one, it should at least be able to two-step, if not directly do it if you ever need to.
Yeah.
If they start asking for something different.
Yeah, and like I said, I had experience with AccuFund in the past, and they do have a wonderful ability of customizing reports. If we want to see it data a certain way, they can go in and they can format that and enter that whole reporting into our database that we can utilize it as much as we want. So it just seems a little bit friendlier software, and it kind of just modernizes the ability of software in general now versus 20 years ago.
How's it gonna work when you change the systems over? Like, will it take all the data that you have currently and be able to?
Well, I was told that they are able to input certain data, but the challenge that finance, I think any finance department would have when switching software is you have to do it at a specific point. So that's the reason why I'm coming now versus waiting to put it on a future year, because you want to transition at the end of the year where you have to put a hard line there anyway. They would be able to go and put old data in, but we wouldn't be able to put all of the data that we've had for the last 20 years into it. We would be able to utilize the old system for pulling information, but the sooner you kind of get into a new system that allows you to search and add more data into it, I think the nicer it'll be moving forward and having that in one system.
If we switch systems, then you're saying that you would still have access to the old system, at least to view things.
Yeah, we
We just
currently,
wouldn't have ongoing support and whatever with it, but what's there, we would still be able to look at.
yeah, so we currently own our software. We pay a key holder fee to be able to utilize it, but it is on our own server, and we have all that data, in-house. So if we don't utilize it anymore, we still have all that data that's available for us.
Mike, it's at the end of the life cycle too, like the software we're gonna need to change no matter what?
Well, I would say it would be advised to do that. So the software that we're currently using is more than capable of doing what it's been doing for the last 20 years that we've had it. But as JC had mentioned, the difficulty within that system is some of the ways that the entries go in there and the way that it reports, and not just being able to, things out into Excel, which it can't do, which, I mean, obviously, as you can imagine, anybody that's doing finances and financial work, they're usually in spreadsheets of some form, and to not be able to pull things out into spreadsheets makes it rather difficult. So everything that it prints out from that system is almost in PDF format. So if you could imagine trying to do financial and accounting work through PDFs only. So that's a difficulty that we face. The upgrade is not, it's probably more desired than it is required. We could still continue to utilize the system that we have and continue to pay the annual costs, but I think it would be prudent to consider the upgrade, not only because of the way that it does the reporting, but also the way that they'll be able to put the entries in. JC is kind of underselling the fact that she also utilized this system in Greensburg. A lot of other municipalities use it as well, but I think that's another benefit to considering a move over to this system. She has familiarity with it, so there'll be less of a training approach, and she'll be able to kind of dive right in. The other finance staff in the building will have to learn, of course, but the system is designed to work for municipalities, so it should be user-friendly in that regard, and there are a lot of municipalities that use it. And as she said, the reason why staff is coming forward now to make the request or have council consider this, this request is because if council is willing to approve this, we would break out the installation over the remainder portion of the year. They would begin converting some of the old data. So we would still have the old system, but some of it would come into the new system, probably a several-year look back. But you certainly wouldn't need 20 years worth of data in the new system. And the conversion would take place over, at the end of the year. So we would pay a portion in this calendar year, and then the remaining half of the balance would be paid in the second, in next year's budget. So even though we didn't budget for it this year, only half of this cost will be attributed to this year. And that's again why we're coming to council asking for consideration, and the other half will be broken into and planned into next year's budget. So it'd really be only half of this cost that is kind of unplanned and would be unaccounted for in the budget. So again, kind of adding into some of the things that JC had said, but trying to make a few other points as well, that I think it would be a very important tool for them to have available. The other software there was a request from a council member about some recreation items and a breakdown of some of the costs of one of the programs that we have in recreation. And unfortunately, the system we have can't pull that report. So we have to go to a manual spreadsheet, create that spreadsheet, and then that was provided. And so anytime we have a request for something like that, we shouldn't have to go and make a separate additional spreadsheet to compile the data and give the, give the financial information away. So I think there are a lot of benefits to it. Hopefully that answers at least a portion of your question, but we'd like to break it out over 2 years. So we began the process a few months ago. This is ultimately the software that I think aligns best for our needs, our staff, and what we're looking to do. JC had kind of loosely mentioned that there are other systems out there, much more comprehensive systems that interrelate with permitting and other financial accounting functions, all the way over to things that the police do or other different departments, recreation, rentals, things like that. But we're not looking for one piece of comprehensive software that covers other departments in the municipality. I think we just want to keep it simple and straightforward, have the accounting department, finance department be able to have a piece of software that works for them, and the other departments we can explore, if and when that time comes. So that's why we're looking kind of just to accounting only exclusive software. So, and this one seems to make the most sense for the municipality.
I have one other question.
Sure.
So as operating systems get updated, sometimes the software that you own is not able to be accessed through those operating systems. Is this something where we're always going to be able to access that information?
Yeah, we should be able to. There's another accounting software that they had prior to Great Plains, and we're still able to go into that system and pull data. So, I mean, it will be available. It won't just disappear if upgrades take place. And there are a couple of things that I just want to note that are good to keep into consideration before I wrap it up. But purchase orders are something that's included in this where it's a part of their system. So when purchase orders are issued, they're directly put into the accounting software, allocated out to the correct expenses, and then it prints out the approval sheet to be signed. And then at that point, when invoices start coming in, you just go into the purchase order that's referenced, and it will eat away at the purchase order or close out the purchase order, showing that it's either still available or it's not available. Which it's nice to know that it's showing the limitation right in the system, and then you don't have to do the multiple entries where you have to have it over here and then you have to go and enter it in over here. Once it's in for the purchase order, all you do is attach it. So I mean, there's a lot of capabilities, and I've just kind of touched on the highlight, but there are some packets there that kind of itemize out its capabilities. And if you have any other questions, I'm more than willing to answer any of them.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Council.
Well, this will be coming up again on the action items too, I guess, if you have any more questions.
Well, that was mistakenly put in there on me. I'm very used to putting things on action items. And so when I went to put the discussion in, I put it under action, not knowing that he put it under the discussion for the first one. So we'll be able to strike that from later in the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Council.
Okay. Next is the discussion concerning the proposed ordinance regulating injector wells in the municipality of Murraysville. Mr.
Morrison.
Good evening, Council. So I guess you're wondering why are we dealing with injection wells after it got such a bad name in Plumboro, huh? Well, because Pennsylvania State Act 247, which covers the municipal planning code, states that any legal land use must be accounted for in a community that has a zoning ordinance. We do not currently provide for any provisions or regulations in our existing ordinance to regulate injection wells. So we went about with the Planning Commission in developing a proposed ordinance. I know you all probably looked at your Dropbox support documents and went to all the websites that were identified in there.
One didn't work.
Pardon?
One didn't work.
Yeah, the first one for some reason didn't work. But if you viewed the Pennico link, I thought it was a pretty good summary of what an injection well is, how they go about it. Admittedly, it was authored by the industry, but I think it was quite good in giving you an overview. As Carl had mentioned, the proposed ordinance is to regulate injector wells in the B district. So one of the things that we had to look at in dealing with developing the ordinance was, can it be legally located within a B district? We don't have a whole lot of B district, and the B district acreage is somewhat limited. And we wanted to be able to set a minimum acreage on this particular use because of the impact. Now, this use differs from a Marcellus well in that, as we know, a Marcellus well is an industrial use for a period of time while they're drilling and fracking the well. This, an injection well, is a constant industrial use. You have deliveries day after day after day of fluids to the site that are injected down a well into the subsurface. So we felt comfortable in designating it in the B district as versus an overlay district. We reviewed all of the business district properties and found that a percentage would meet the requirement of a minimum of 5 acres. So when we addressed the actual use, we wanted to make sure that the impact was also minimized on adjacent business uses, because we've done a lot of work in trying to maintain our business district. So there is some some comfortability there with the location. So as Carl said, the well needs to be with no closer than 250 feet to the property line and no closer than 750 feet to a protected structure, like is in the Marcellus ordinance. Like the Marcellus ordinance, it provides for a protected structure to sign off and permit the use if it's closer than 750 feet. Some of the other provisions that are in here that we feel comfortable in providing at this point in time, because the actual permitting of the use, the injection of the material into the ground, is regulated by the EPA. The state permits the actual well, whether it's drilling of the new well or re-drilling of an existing well. I understand that the state is considering putting provisions in place to regulate this. I think there's about 8 or 9 states across the country now that has taken the permitting away from the EPA, and it does at the state level. So our luck is we'll probably pass the ordinance, and then the state will get involved, and we'll have to deal with them then. But until that time comes, we'll try to get away with as much as we can to regulate here on the local level. Now, you'll see in the body of the ordinance there are some requests that deal with items that we weren't able to regulate on the Marcellus provisions. As you may recall, we can say where Marcellus goes, but we can't say how. But we have in this ordinance to some extent, with the idea of pre and post drilling, being able to set baselines for impact to the surface, and also baselines for existing chemicals that may exist in the groundwater prior to the drilling. Those then would have post-drilling testing done to see if there was impact as a result of the injection wells. Other than that, it follows pretty much the Marcellus ordinance as far as screening and land development requirements. The Planning Commission worked on this probably for 3 or 4 meetings and made a recommendation to Council consider passage of it. This was an introduction tonight. If Council feels it's informed, then we can begin the public hearing process in June.
Jim, how many potential parcels are there of the 5-acre size?
I believe there was 53. Don't hold me to that, but I'll have that for you for the next meeting. I think there was 53.
That's along the Route 22 and 380?
286.
Pardon?
286.
286.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the setbacks are essentially the same, really, and we were around 5% or a little bit less of our land number of parcels is about 5% of the municipality that could be fracked. are we still looking at roughly the same number, or is anything else? I tried to do like a compare by compare. Is there anything
It's
else?
actually less. The amount of business properties as it relates to the total land area is actually a smaller percentage than what it was under the Marcellus.
Can you help to explain why, just for everybody listening?
Why it's smaller? Well, first, there's not a whole lot of acreage here left at Marysville that is Zone B. And that was the biggest controlling factor.
What's the life cycle of one of those wells like? Once it's, how much can they put in one well, or do they put multiple locations on that property?
I'm not sure. The numbers I have seen, Mr. McKenna, was that the largest well that's been permitted in Pennsylvania takes 30,000 gallons max a day. I saw regulations where they've had issues in Oklahoma and Ohio with seismicity, where it created earthquakes. They were pumping up to 500,000 gallons. So I think it depends on the permeability of the layer that they're going into. And I wouldn't know what that would be until we would see the location of the well.
Just out
Any other
of
questions?
sheer curiosity, slightly unrelated, but out of sheer curiosity, how are things going with our sound study?
I'm sorry,
A sound study and just kind of general,
the noise ordinance?
I can give an update on that.
Because it
We worked with Babbage Acoustics to try to identify, I believe it's 10 or so different areas of the community that we want to do the testing. We reached out to homeowners that were identified in those various areas to see if they would cooperate and allow us to place the equipment on their property for roughly a week's time. We've heard back from some of them, but not all yet. So once we get the homeowners on board, and again, we're using homeowners because the equipment that's going to be utilized from the sound testing company is rather expensive. It's a little bit difficult to mount, especially if you have higher, taller buildings. So they've identified residences that we're hoping that would volunteer and cooperate and help us out. So we're waiting to hear back from those residents, and once we get them all on board, then they will deploy the equipment and begin the testing process.
what's a
If you
very,
recall, the issue was, with the existing ordinance, was the ambient
noise is already higher than,
And the purpose of this is to establish what the ambient noise is for Murraysville, and then build the
Yes.
ordinance from that ambient baseline.
so given that, and thank you, Mr. Morrison, for that explanation. Given that, I know you don't have a crystal ball on homeowner responses, but what would your very, very rough idea, like what's your goal for when it may be ready? Because I feel like that's going to be crucial for the development of this ordinance. I will be gone, probably, or by the time it's all done, but so will you. But I do think it's going to be crucial to have that.
Yeah, I can say that I don't know how soon the ordinance can be developed, but the testing hopefully can begin sometime in the next month or so.
he did
Again, it's
say
just getting the necessary property owners on board with allowing us to use their property.
Right.
We've heard back from a handful, I believe 3 or 4. We still have about 3 or 4 of the other areas that we're waiting to hear from. So I would say in the next month or so, we might be able to deploy the testing equipment, and then from there, I don't know how long it takes to build out the ordinance itself.
I have a hard time here.
I'll just say, I think we're probably all on the same page, but I just think it'll be really crucial in order to have the strongest ordinance possible, especially given some of the concerns over the injection wells, over even standard fracking. And I think the biggest complaint that is ever heard really is noise for the most part. Once it starts, and this is different with an injection well, it is more constant. I think it's going to be critical, number one, for us to have a good ordinance for injection wells, but I don't think we can have a very good ordinance for injection wells if we haven't re-examined and have a much further down the road and a much better sense of how we need to revise that. So hopefully, I know it's a top priority for you, but hopefully that's done by the time we have the hearing so that whoever is sitting on council when it comes to a vote is as prepared as they need to be with their facts. So, thank you.
Jim, like you mentioned like the 53 or close to that properties that they are. So if a company wanted to put an injector well, would they pay and permit who owns that land, or do they purchase the land for that use? Or
They
it
would
can
have
be-
to have either equitable title to the property or some kind of arrangement with the property owner.
property
to permit it to occur. Now, I would think that in most instances, given the few amount of properties that do exist in the B district in general, that there maybe have to be property acquisition or some kind of land agreement there to be able to develop one of these sites.
What type of traffic does that bring in? Like you said, it's constant. I know it's more constant than
It'd be
that.
100 trucks a day.
What's that?
100 trucks a day.
100 trucks.
Could be, it depends. It
Yeah.
depends on the demand. And they're the type of trucks.
Yeah.
Right now, most of the waste is going to Ohio that isn't recycled.
Okay, Jim, do you want permission to advertise tonight? Is that what you?
No, we can bring it back, because we have to advertise for a public hearing, and I think if we just take this step by step, because at some point, I'm sure we're going to get reaction from the public,
Okay.
both positive and negative.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, we move on to action items. 13A. I need a motion for 13A.
To make a motion to appoint Darren Miller to the Environmental Advisory Committee to fill the remainder of a vacant, unexpired term ending in December 31st, 2025.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie Lee Corns and Jamie Lee. Any questions on this appointment?
Darren's an asset to the community, and I'm sure he'll be an asset to EAC.
Carl?
Great to
Well, actually, I don't know Darren, and I hadn't heard much about him. I would have to perhaps rely on others' opinion here.
Yeah.
He's
I
the
may
one
have
that was
to
doing the
abstain.
run,
Pardon?
the long distance run. He came and presented. That's Darren Miller.
The idea to
that's
council to have
Oh, that's the guy.
The swimmer. The
Okay.
swimmer that swam. Yeah.
He did a presentation here one night. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
great community
Yeah.
member.
I do.
Yes.
Okay.
He grew up in Murraysville, and I think it's great to get these positions filled too, because they're really
Any other
important
questions?
on these committees.
I'll just simply state, and I apologize, but I want to make it clear. Obviously, appointments typically occur at the beginning of a new calendar year, but there are vacancies on the EAC. He expressed interest in serving in that capacity, so I think it makes sense to make an appointment at this point in the year to fill that vacancy. And as I said, he has worked with some of the members of the EAC on other projects and other items in the community and expressed an interest in serving. So I think it would be a valuable addition. And there are vacancies on that committee to begin with, so it would be prudent to fill some of them.
Okay. No other questions? Everybody in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. In a motion for 13B.
Make a motion to authorize advertisement of ordinance number 1074-23, the fee ordinance, chapter 112-6, and ordinance amending existing fee ordinance number 1062-22.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie Lee Corns and Jamie Lee. Any questions on this item?
I'll just provide a brief explanation to council. So this is specifically related to adding a fee to the fee ordinance for the use of the kitchen portion of the facility at Leftwich Pavilion. So we currently rent the pavilion out. There is a fee in the ordinance to rent the pavilion itself, but there is a concession stand area that was previously used by the soccer organization. They have stopped using that portion of the facility. They're no longer going to have concessions during their soccer events, or at least not out of that area. So we thought it could just be an additional item to allow anybody that would like to rent the pavilion to also have access to that kitchen facility. There's a refrigerator, a freezer, a deep sink in there, utility sink, and a few other small items. So there wouldn't really be any cooking in there, but if folks wanted to use that to have a sink or refrigerator, plug in crock pots, things like that, As you know, we don't have any pavilions in the community that really have a kitchen area. So this would kind of be our first opportunity to be able to offer something like that. So I think it's worthwhile testing that out. It would be a small fee of an additional $50 to use that kitchen facility for anybody that rents the pavilion itself, and that's what we'll be adding to the ordinance. So it'll be an additional $50 on top of the rental to have access to the kitchen facility. So that's what the modification of the ordinance would consist of.
I think it's 100.
Any questions, anybody?
Oh, I could be wrong.
Because we propose $100 in addition to the regular.
apologize. So I had that
Okay, I just
reversed.
wanted anybody listening to know that it was 100.
Thank you for correcting me. Yes, I apologize. So the fee is currently 50, and this will be an additional 100, I guess, to make the rental.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next is 13C. We already had this discussion.
Scratching that one.
That, I said, we already had this discussion, so,
14A. 14A. We're going to 14A.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 1073-23, an ordinance for rezoning of approximately 19.3 acres, tax parcel 49-10-13-0-014, Logan Ferry Road, from R1 residential to R2 residential.
Second.
Jamie Lee and Matt, thank you. Any questions? We've already discussed this in the past also, I think,
Yeah.
right?
I know they're looking for rezoning, and I know that we, last meeting, denied a rezoning request. I understand that they're talking about dividing it and having a parcel that would be environmentally friendly, but what certainty do we have of that?
Well, they're putting that in an easement, right? Conservation easement?
Right.
That there will be a conservation easement that runs with the property. And this is something that I believe 2 meetings ago we had approved, and now this is kind of the formal portion of that process by putting it in ordinance. So I think everything was ironed out at that time, and that easement does come along with the division of that parcel, or I guess it would attach to all the parcels that are a part of this
Okay,
small
if that's the
development.
case, then, yeah, okay.
Because Adam, when they do that conservation easement, I mean, that's forever, right? I mean, that doesn't.
Correct, it's a perpetual.
Right.
And
So
they're-
it protects the municipality from
And they're-
being changed.
I think, just as a refresher, they're not building anything in addition to what they could build right now without the rezoning. So they're not requesting the rezoning to build more, to actually just,
Yeah.
Use the land smarter.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
make less of an impact, I guess.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Okay, next we have 15A.
Make a motion to authorize advertisement of the DPW-2-23 2023 Alternative Road Surface Treatment Project.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie and Jamie. I think we already discussed this with Bill before about what he's doing. Is there any questions on it?
No.
No questions? May we have a
Aye.
all approval? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, nothing for parks. Any old business?
Old business,
No new business?
sir.
Is there an executive session?
There is not.
We need one more motion, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Motion adjourned. Jamie and Jamie.